I'm Lisa Berry.
Arlene Schofield.
My name is Shireen Snow.
My name is Carla A. Miles.
Diana Camuto.
This is Christine Dunford.
I'm me, Eden.
Caroline Macy. This is Walker Fannin.
Lydia Camille Dixon.
I'm Sarah Dates Wardam.
My name is Linda Preston, and you're watching the Keith Andrew Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Keith Andrew Network. This is episode Season 5, episode 434. I'm here with a good friend of mine, Mr. John. I just want to say thank you for being a guest on my talk show.
Thank you for having me on, Keith.
No, absolutely. The honor's all mine. And now for people who want to know what my talk show's about, the whole point of my talk show is to show people that even with having a learning disability, I can still amount to something. And at the same time, I'm able to turn myself into an example for people out there dealing with any types of learning disabilities and disabilities. But you should never give up. It is to prove people wrong. It is to prove that labels do not dictate who you are and who you're going to be. It is to prove to them you can still amount to something. So hashtag break the labels. So that being said, half hour, 37 minutes every time. And starting off, what can you tell us about yourself?
Okay, well, my name's John Crowther, and normally I'm an attorney during the day, but I picked up a hobby in the last few years, and I've become a comic book creator. Specifically, I've got a couple of comics, a couple of genres, one being a superhero genre, and that's where I broke into the industry with a book called Rochelle that some people might have heard of. We got some pretty good attention a couple of years ago, and we're an ongoing series with a publisher called Antarctic Press, and then more recently, I do a lot of books on professional wrestlers, biographical comics on professional wrestlers, and that's through a publishing company called Squared Circle Comics.
Ah, nice. Well, first two things I want to talk to you about is what we talked about before we got started. And you got to go to my first question. Who and what influenced you to become an artist? And you said you were friends with and you were working with Lenny Pablo. I would have loved to have him back on the show. We actually did an interview back in Season 1. But back then it was pretty much, Season 1 it was pretty much like this. I was recording from the phone, so what you saw or so what the camera got. So if you go back about Season 1 and 2, you see that process from the phone to now it's cut in half. So I gotten better over the years. But yeah, Lenny Pablo was one of my favorite interviews. And the interview is still up there. Trying to get him back on the show for part 2. But you also mentioned that you are making a comic book for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, to answer your initial question, you asked how I got into the industry, and it's really kind of a neat story. I mentioned before, I'm an attorney, and but I've always had a love for comics ever since I was a kid. So several years ago, I decided I was looking at comics that were available, and I didn't feel there were any, in my opinion, that were conservatively appropriate female superheroes for girls. So, and I've got a teenage daughter, so I wanted to create something really for my teenage daughter. So I came up with this idea about a teenage girl with cockroach DNA. I know it's a little different, but I can explain that too, which I don't think you know the background. I think it really ties in well with what you're trying to do. But I came up with this idea, and we got picked up by a small publisher in Florida called A Comics, and they ran me for free on an issue 0. And from there, we got discovered by a larger publisher, which is Antarctic Press, and they picked us up, and we became an ongoing series with them. But from that, I had some mutual friends in the wrestling industry that told me there were some wrestlers, or a wrestler in particular, who wanted to have his life story told. And this isn't Lanny. This is kind of what led to Lanny. I said, well, who is it? I said, give me their phone number, and I can promise you, if I tell somebody I'm going to get something done, I get it done. So, They told me it was Nikolai Volkov. So my jaw kind of hit the floor because I remember seeing Nikolai when I was a little kid. I was a big wrestling fan too. And I gave him a call and talked to Nikolai, and he talked about what he wanted to do. And that was actually the first wrestling comic that I put out. And from there, it just kind of branched on. The next book we did was the first in the series for Brian Blair and the Killer Bees. We followed that up with the first in a series that we're doing right now for Hacksaw Jim Duggan. And then that one now has been followed by Lanny Poffo. And Lanny's is a one-shot comic, talks about his life, obviously the life of his family, the great Angelo Poffo and Macho Man Randy Savage. And that one actually is currently, for if you're not familiar, it's funding on a site called Kickstarter. And what Kickstarter is it's a crowdfunding site that, for lack of a better definition, it's where people can go and pre-order copies of the book or other incentives that are there, such as autographs from Lanny and such. And they can do that, and that is what actually funds putting the book together. That's what pays the artists and the writers and things like that. So that currently is going on. But if you wanted me to tie back a little bit, what I'm doing with the Rochelle book, which is kind of neat, is all of the characters in there, and I do talks at schools around the country. Everyone is a little bit different, and one of the themes behind the story is to teach people that just because you are different or someone is different from us, it doesn't make you better or them better. It just means we're different. And I've got several characters that kind of go along with that. One being obviously Rochelle being part cockroach, but her best friend is a young girl named Angel. But in the story, she takes on the persona of a superhero named Lopside. And the reason she takes that is because she's a girl that limps. So in one of the early issues, we have this girl who is in school and she's in a cloak and she's limping and the kids are taunting her and teasing her, chanting Lopside at her. Finally, she can't take it anymore. She throws off her cloak and they realize why she's limping. She's built like a She-Hulk underneath her cloak. So what kids realized once that happened was that what made them tease her and what set her apart actually made her better than them. So if you take time to actually get to know people and to learn that their differences are and appreciate their differences, you'll learn that everybody is special in their own way, and those differences are what make us all special people.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do have a couple questions for you off the air. But, what were some of your favorite comics that you ever done? You mentioned you worked with a couple of wrestlers. Mm-hmm. And, hey, if you can put a good word, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
But what were some of your favorite stories that you made for them?
Oh, for the wrestlers?
Yes.
Just to let you know, they're all biographical. So I'm not making up stories really on them, which is we can go into that. But what I'm trying to do, this is more, in my idea, it's more for the fans and for the wrestlers, because it's the way for, a lot of people only know what you see on TV.
Yeah.
And they don't know the background of these guys, what got them into wrestling, what their life was about before they came to wrestling. So what we do is we're talking about their childhood up until their career, and then we stay kayfabe on the matches. We don't want to say anything was scripted. So the matches are the matches. If they became a champion, yeah, they were a champion. But for instance, I'm working on Bruno Sammartino's book right now. A lot of people don't realize Bruno's story. I mean, Bruno was a guy who, when he was 8 years old, he was living and hiding in the mountains, in the Italian mountains, from the Nazis with his mother. And they had to immigrate into this country when he was 10 years old. Initially, believe it or not, he failed his physical to come into the U.S. because he was so malnourished. And eventually he comes to the United States and he sets the world record in the bench press. And he goes on to hold the title for 11 years. But a lot of people, his first wrestling match ever, besides playing around in school, was against an orangutan. I mean, not a lot of people know that about the great Bruno Sammartino. Nikolai Volkov. He really did defect to this country, not from Russia, but from communist Yugoslavia. His grandfather was the personal bodyguard for the Emperor Franz Joseph. He was killed by communist assassins, back in the late 1800s. So, I mean, there's some really interesting stories behind these guys, and that's what we're bringing out. They're not made-up stories; they're their life stories.
Now, what makes you want to write about them? For an example, say someone like me that would ask you if you want to do a book about me. Do you think I'm good enough to do a book about, or do you think once I get to reach that point?
Well, it's not about whether you're good enough. I mean, honestly, every person out there, I've got in the type of business that I work in law, I have a lot of interesting people come in, and a lot of people have very interesting stories. But what you'll find, and it's all about the market, and I think someone said it when they were talking about booking wrestling. What puts butts in seats? You know, and so it's got to be a guy or a gal who has an interesting backstory, and it's got to be one that has a strong social media following. In order for us to get proper funding, I can write the best story in the world, but I've learned over time that to sell books, for anybody to buy the book, they've either got to find it an extremely interesting story that's usually fantasy, it's not biographical, or someone that they know of from the past, someone they want to know about. So if they don't, and all of these guys and girls, because I say girls, there are a couple of girls we're writing for too, they bring that fan base with them. So we immediately walk in. So it wouldn't be, if you asked me to write your book, the issue wouldn't be whether or not you had an interesting story. It'd be, do you have a strong enough fan base to carry that story to bookstores? And that's kind of what the bottom line comes down to.
All right. Well, we can always talk about it off the air. But for people who are interested in working with you, how much do you charge, and what is the process? Okay.
Well, when we're working with the wrestlers, all of those books are paid for through Kickstarter. Okay. Any kind of book, if someone doesn't want to go through Kickstarter, we negotiate. I can negotiate, and it really depends on the individual. I won't give you a set price, but we would negotiate what you can afford, what we can do. I'm a writer. I'm not the artist. So typically, a lot of people don't realize what goes behind the actual creation of a comic. What you've got is there are so many people involved. You've got a writer, you've got an artist, but the artist can be broken up into 3 or 4, even sometimes 4 different people. You've got a penciler, you've got an inker, you've got a colorist, you've got a flatter before a colorist, you've got a letterer. So depending on the people that you bring into it, you could have anywhere from 1 to possibly 6 different people working on this book, and then you've got to negotiate contracts with all those different people. So we do that for the wrestlers, or the publishing company does. We get paid percentage-wise depending on how much we bring into the Kickstarter. For someone individually who wants it, and they couldn't do it through a Kickstarter, we just have to sit down and kind of negotiate what we could think would be a good price, find out a price range, and try and hook them up with an artist and it's also within the price range and those kind of things.
Yeah, well, we can always negotiate about it off the air. Now, the next question is, you mentioned that you were a lawyer. Who influenced you to become a lawyer, and what were some of your funny cases that you ever had over the years?
Okay, well, that's kind of a double question. I come from a family of lawyers. So I think my great-granduncle was the first lawyer in the family. And I'd say, well, indirectly, he probably was the influence because my dad followed him to law school, and then I followed Dad. And I've eventually taken over Dad's practice. Now, the question about funny cases, I don't do that kind of law. I don't do case law. I do estate planning, like creating wills and trusts and real estate law, transactional stuff. So I don't really see funny cases. I mean, I do have interesting clients that come in and talk, but I don't get in the courtroom too often.
Now, do you just work with people just based in Florida, or do you work with people all around the world? Doing probate, I do deal with clients outside of Florida. I've had clients as far away as the U.S. Virgin Islands and Ireland, but it's all based on cases that are based in Florida, because how law works is you can only practice in the state where you're licensed. Yeah.
I'm only licensed in the state of Florida. So I can handle any client who lives in Florida or any kind of action that's involved in Florida. I mean, I typically don't go outside my field to study. I don't do criminal law and that kind of nasty stuff.
It's kind of funny you mentioned probate. You ever see Who Framed Roger? This is kind of like an oxymoron. You ever see Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Yes, I did. Many years ago.
And when he says they're talking about probate, and they had a rabbit fight, he said prostate, and Bob Hoskins says, not prostate, probate. That's the word that's reminding me of the movie. Yeah. It's a classic movie. The Weasels all gave me nightmares.
Yeah, that was actually, the way they did that movie back in the day, that was kind of revolutionary. Having the comics and the actual, people in there as well. I think they did a really nice job.
And it was the only movie where Disney and Marvel, Disney and Warner Brothers actually worked together on. After that, they just went their own separate ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I'm going to pass the show over to you. Was there anything you wanted to promote, anything you wanted to talk about? You can ask me anything you want. Buzz off.
Okay, well, the main thing I think I mentioned to you that I wanted to promote was obviously for Lanny Poffo, the book that we're doing for him. Again, the only way it gets created is if we meet our funding goal. And so we're currently funding on Kickstarter. You can find it just by going to Kickstarter.com and typing in the genius Lanny Poffo. He's the only genius Lanny Poffo with a Kickstarter going right now. And pre-order your book. I mean, we got everything. We got prices in range from $2 all the way up to you can have Lanny write a poem for you on a Frisbee. I think that one goes for $75. So, I mean, there's some really cool things on there. And obviously, if we reach that goal, our goal is 4,000. We are currently, I think last time I checked, we were like 2,700 or 2,800. So we're getting closer. But we've only got 19 days left. So I'd like to promote that. You know, anybody who's interested, you know, to pick up a copy of the book or check out some of the cool things that are being offered from Lanny on there. I also wanted to promote a little bit the Rochelle book. We did our first series that came out in 2016. I had some time off while I was working on the wrestling books, but the next short mini-series is coming out and will start being available for pre-order to your comic shops starting in February. You can go to your local comic store and tell them to get you the next 3 issues of Rochelle from Antarctic Press. I'll be at some shows for anybody in the Florida area. I'll be doing a show in Orlando Toy and Comic Con, Sunday the 28th. I'll be doing Florida Pop Con with my daughter, actually, who's a very aspiring young artist, and she's a guest also, and that will be in Orlando from February 2nd to the 4th. And let's see, we've got WrestleCon. I will be a guest at WrestleCon in New Orleans for the wrestling fans, and I'll be sharing a table there with Jeff Law of Mania Marketing, and Lanny Poffo will be there with me. And of course, I know a lot of the guys, a lot of the other wrestlers will be up there, so you'll see me probably flitting around the room and talking to a lot of the other guys I'm writing for or who I'm friends with in the industry. So, you know, that's what I could say. You know, check us out. You can find us on Facebook, Squared Circle Comics, or me personally, John Crowther on Facebook. Rochelle the Teen Cockroach. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on Instagram. We're all over the place. So.
Now, I do have a couple questions for you, then we can wrap up.
Yeah.
It's the first one I was going to ask you is when I first, well, it's a two-parter, but I'll give you an example question. When I approached you, what made you say, actually, screw it, I'm just going to throw it at you. When I first approached you to be a guest on my talk show, what made you say yes? And that's number one. And when someone asks for money in return, do you think you're actually missing the point?
Meaning asking for money in return for being on the show?
Yes.
Well, I did it because if somebody asks me and they're polite, I'll do their show. You know, it's hard to speak. I never charge anybody to do a show. I mean, for me personally, it's about, you know, you're giving me an opportunity to reach your fans and potentially to touch base with new fans for myself. So, you know, I think that's payment in itself. And it's, you know, why I did it when you asked. Like I said, you were friendly and you asked, and I welcome opportunities to be able to talk about what we're doing and get the word out. Some people might charge for their time. You know, it's hard to say. I mean, sometimes I liken it back to doing law. I mean, if someone's primary source of income maybe is doing talk shows, you know, maybe that's the only reason, you know, the only way they make money. So if they ask for some kind of payment, I can't fault them for it. It's hard to talk about, you know, for the individual. Every individual is different. For me personally, I'm not making my money from doing talk shows. To me, it's more.
I agree with you.
Yeah, it's more about me being able to interact with you and get word out about what I'm doing and things like that. It's not about.
But going on the record of, like I said to people, and I used to pay people, and then I realized, you know, I'm just throwing my money away. But then I was like, you know, I'm giving you money, but at the same time, I feels like I'm bribing you. Like, hey, I give you $50 to do my show. But yet, I feel like it takes away from the whole point of my show. it's kind of like, and in a way, it's kind of like I'm taking advantage of me, of the person, because it's kind of like, I'm handicapped, mentally disturbed, retarded, whatever labels you want to throw at me. And he's like, oh yeah, it's a great concept. But, yeah, you have to pay me $100, or you have to pay me $50. It's like, wait, so are you doing my show because it's a good thing, you're supporting a good cause and making a new friend out of it, or is this a quick payoff for you?
Right, understood. Yeah, and one way you can think of it too, I mean, if what you're doing is a service, if people aren't charging, the guys who really need the airtime, and not that I need the airtime, but the people who can benefit more from it are people who you don't need to pay. I mean, there are a lot of artists out there that don't work for DC or don't work for a lot of these big corporations that, because they don't, it's difficult for them to get the word out about what they're trying to do. And those are the people who just, you allowing us, or people like myself who are independent in the market, trying to get our word out, just you allowing us to be on your show is payment to us, because it's an ability for us to get out to a market that normally is unreachable for us. Without people like you doing these shows, it'd be difficult for me to get the word out. I mean, you're up in New York. I'm here in Florida. I can walk around and talk to people in my hometown about what I'm doing, but for me to be able to reach people in New York, it's impossible without someone like yourself doing a show like this and giving me the opportunity, to talk about what I'm doing. And I appreciate it.
Hey, like I said, you're supporting a good cause, making a new friend out of it, but at the same time, if someone would ask for money, it's kind of like, it takes away from the whole concept.
Yeah,
I mean,
but again, it depends on the show. I mean, there are shows that obviously that's what they're based on. And if it takes away from your concept,
yeah,
it shouldn't do it. Because you know what your show is about and what you have created. And if paying people to be on your show is not part of your concept and what your basis is about, then you shouldn't do it. You shouldn't sell yourself off for something that you don't believe in. When there's plenty of people who'd be willing and happy to do your show and honored to do your show without receiving any payment whatsoever.
Yeah, I agree with you. Now, the last question I was going to ask you is social media. Do you think social media can make you or break you? And does that affect your work firm? Because, you mentioned you are a writer, and so the followers do help you. But at the same time, you kind of want to have that professional edge to you. So do you think it kind of interferes or intertwines, if that makes any sense?
I mean, there's people who look me up, obviously, for my work. I find that most people who are clients of mine in the legal aspect find it interesting that I write comics. I don't see where it's really hurt me. I guess if I were writing something controversial, maybe it could affect me. I don't think I do anything controversial. I write about a teenage girl with cockroach DNA or about pro wrestlers. I mean, yeah, the only thing if they don't like me because I write comics, that's a personal issue. If they don't like me because I like wrestling, again, that's a personal issue. And not everybody likes all the same stuff. But I don't really do anything controversial. And, whether social media can hurt you or help you, yeah, I think it can help you. It can help you because it helps spread the word about you. But I'm a firm believer, and I remember my dad telling me this as a kid, and before social media, you can have 1 million people say you're wonderful, and one person says you're an asshole, Okay, that's the bottom line. So ultimately, I think social media can probably hurt people more than it can help them, because nobody wants to talk about the nice guy. What's popular to talk about is the bad guy. So if you do something bad, or you say something bad, or you offend somebody and it gets out there, it's probably going to hurt you more than it ever could have helped you.
Perfect example of that is look at what stuff floated around on Facebook. I don't know if you saw it yet, but for an example, I reached out to Fox News, CNN, NBC, NBC, ABC, whatever networks, and even local ones. And they're like, no, it's not interesting. But now the story about 2 police officers that handcuffed these 2 underage girls and they made them strip down in a Walmart. Oh, let's talk about that. And I'm kind of like, really? Mine's about a good deed? But okay, you want to talk about that garbage.
Yeah. But again, that's just, I think that's a reflection on society as a whole. then they're looking at what sells ads, and what sells ads is what's shocking. What's the bad? What's the bad news? Bad news sells. Good news, not so much.
That's true. Now, I do have a couple questions for you off the air about wrapping up our interview segment. It was a real honor and privilege to have you as a guest.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, go ahead. Skype has a delay in it.
It was nice, very nice of you to have me on. Thank you.
No, absolutely. Hey, you supporting a good cause, making a new friend out of it. And I do have a couple questions for you off the air about wrapping up the segment. I'm looking forward to part 2 down the road.
Sounds good.
Me, Mark Medley. Hi, everybody. This is Mark Neely.
Barry Papick.
This is Peter Bruno.
My name is Kyle Collier. This is Julio Santiago, better known as Dynamite.
I'm Richard Epcar.
Orange Chow.
This is Kerrigan Mahan.
This is Goldner.
And we both support
Keith Andrew.
My name is Ron Wasserman, and I am supporting Keith Andrew and what he is doing, and you better do the same, or I'm gonna come kick your ass.